Coming up in today's newscast, an IDF soldier succumbs to wounds sustained in the West Bank, Israeli tanks open fire on targets in the Gaza Strip, and it's 5 o'clock somewhere. Get ready for the lowdown on Cocktail Week here in Tel Aviv. After fighting for his life in the hospital, an IDF soldier from the elite Duvdevan unit has succumbed to wounds sustained in the line of duty and passed away. Sergeant Ronen Lubarsky was part of a team conducting overnight arrests in a Palestinian refugee camp in the West Bank last Thursday. During the raid, a Palestinian suspect dropped a marble slab on his head from up high. Sergeant Lubarsky was quickly rushed to the hospital, where doctors struggled for 2 days to save his life. Hundreds of Israeli citizens have turned out for Sergeant Lubarsky's funeral, held late last night at the Mount Herzl Military Cemetery in Jerusalem. Members of Lubarsky's unit praised the 20-year-old's bravery throughout his service, with Israeli leaders offering their sorrows. The Duvdevan unit is an elite corps of IDF soldiers trained for making terror-related arrests in dangerous and often covert conditions. This year alone, Duvdevan soldiers have arrested over 150 Palestinian suspects on terror charges. Sergeant Lubarsky is the 18th soldier killed while serving in Duvdevan since the unit was created over 20 years ago, though notably one of the only ones killed by an enemy. An IDF manhunt is currently underway to track down those responsible for Sergeant Lubarsky's death. Violence erupted along the Gaza border earlier this morning. Palestinians from the Islamic Jihad terror group attempted to injure IDF troops with an improvised explosive device disguised as a pair of wire cutters. The army detected and destroyed the IED with no injuries reported. And further, the IDF tanks have just shelled Islamic Jihad outposts in the Strip in retaliation for this failed attack. At this time, at least 2 members of Islamic Jihad have been killed in the blast. This exchange of fire is, of course, only the latest in a string of violence along the border. This weekend saw thousands of Gazans gathering at the border to protest Israel's ongoing blockade of the Strip. Though these protests have downsized considerably from what we saw during the Hamas-sponsored March of Return protests over the last few months, Israeli security forces have remained on their toes. Unrest in the Strip has peaked in the wake of U.S. President Donald Trump's decision to relocate the American embassy to Jerusalem earlier this month. That rage has boiled over into countless infiltration attempts. Gazans are also continuing to fly homemade firebombs over the border into Israel using paper kites. Firefighters spent much of this weekend attempting to put out multiple fires in southern Israel from such attacks, after the blazes spiraled out of control, fanned by the intense summer heat. Following reports of this weekend's airstrikes near Damascus, fingers are again pointing at Israel. Many believe, however, that before an all-out war breaks out between Israel and Iran, Russia will somehow intercede. And here to explore this scenario is Dr. Nir Boms, a research fellow at the Moshe Dayan Center at the Tel Aviv University, and Dr. Martin Sherman, founder and executive director of the Israel Institute for Strategic Studies. Thank you both so much for joining me today. Okay, so first question, let's get this out of the way. Is Israel looking at a foreseeable war with Iran in Syria? That's the big question here. Let's start with you.
Since February, the first time when Israel had to confront an Iranian surveillance or Iranian actually armed UAV penetrating into Israel, we have seen an actual war between Israel and Iran in some ways in Syria. But of course, this scenario has been in the cards before. We have to remember that Hezbollah, the most significant militia, Iranian militia that is stationed in this region, has been here for quite some time with an arsenal of 130 or so thousand missiles ready and armed, pointing at Israel's border. So the scenario of a war with Iran has certainly been in the cards for a while.
Set, is what you're saying.
And Israel, of course, has been prepared for that. And just the last sentence on that, the fact that about 35 minutes following the drone penetration into the Israeli border, we've already seen targets being hit on the other side, means that Israel was indeed prepared.
Dr. Sherman, is this where you think this is all headed?
Well, I think no one can discount the possibility of war, but I think we should distinguish between sporadic skirmishes, even big ones like we've seen at the moment, and a far bigger confrontation. And I think that depends on a number of things. First of all, I think it depends on how much of a constraint the Russians can be. And that depends, I think, on how Israel can convince them that protecting Israel's interests by containing Iran in Syria is not necessarily undermining Russian interests in Syria. I think it depends on perceived American resolve as well to back Israel in any action. And I think in many ways it also depends on Iranian stamina, because for all its saber rattling, as I've said before, Iran is in bad shape. Even without the U.S. withdrawing from sanctions, their economy is in free fall. There's domestic unrest. There's a massive water crisis, which is going to cause millions of people to be displaced. Their currency is in free fall. So they're not really on a sound footing for a large-scale confrontation. However, I don't think we should be complacent.
Right. Well, I want to touch on something you said, which is that, Russia, of course, has interest in this game, and a lot is pretty unclear about exactly what those interests really are. And I mean, we just saw today that 9 Russian fighters were killed fighting the Islamic State alongside Assad's army. So my question is, what exactly does Russia out of this, considering how much skin that they're willing to put in the game here?
Well, I think they want to keep a presence in the Eastern Mediterranean. They don't want to give that up. But I'm not sure how committed they are to the Assad regime or to an alliance with the Iranians. I think basically, many people would say it's an arrangement of current convenience. Although I feel that one of the major elements in Russian foreign policy is their animosity towards the Americans. And doing harm to the Americans might be not an insignificant consideration in any decisions they take.
Well, Nir, I want to ask you, do you think that Russia's cooperation, let's say, with Iran is one of convenience, as Dr. Sherman suggests?
Well, Russia has 3 main interests in Syria. It's security, it's political, and it's economic. Security, as Dr. Sherman said, it's about keeping an arm's length with the Mediterranean, having access to the Mediterranean Sea, having military installations there that's supposed to help its regional hegemony. From the economic perspective, it's about oil, it's about gas, it's about making sure that Russia is going to be the one who's going to be willing and dealing, not just with Syria, but with the entire region. And that connects into this issue of broader regional influence, political influence, selling weapons, systems, etc. For that, Russia would like to have all partners at arm's length and would like to be the arbiter of all of them, including Iran, including Israel, including Turkey, including the Americans if they can.
Sure. And that's certainly what we're seeing play out in southern Syria. But my question is, if the cards fall and we see a war scenario with Israel, whatever form that war takes, fighting Iran in Syria, which side is Russia going to take in that situation?
I'll say the following. There have been many agreements signed that are not really worth their paper that they've signed. The one agreement that has to do with partially with the Astana Accord and partially with the American, Jordanian, and brackets Israeli understanding with Russia has to do with the de-escalation zone in the south and the part of Dara. This is why we've heard today the American State Department saying that they're going to see they're not going to like the idea of violating this particular agreement. Russia seems to have some understanding with Israel on this issue. Why? Because that's really what's going to trigger a more harsher Israeli response. I think that what Russia is trying to do is trying to say to the Iranians as well, look, let's try to keep this a bit separated. We are not interested in further escalation. This is not good. We have invested enough in this conflict. We don't want to invest more. We don't want to get other partners involved in all of this. Whether the Iranian stamina and the Assad regime desire to take control over the south as well will prevail, and whether we'll see other response, including, for example, the Americans, the next days will certainly unveil.
Right. I saw an interesting idea published recently that one of the payoffs that the Russians are seeking or expecting is to have Russian companies and Russian corporations take part in the reconstruction of Syria. And for that to be profitable, they can't let the fighting spiral out of control.
Interesting. So you're saying that maybe these interests are purely financial?
Well, no, I think that they may have down the line a big financial stake in the reconstruction of Syria, which may give them a great motivation to keep things below the boil.
Your opinion. Do you think that, given those interests, that Russia would side with Israel in the case that a war broke out? Because remember, as you said, the United States would, of course, get in the mix, and maybe Russia would take a side that the United States wouldn't. But a lot of people think that the United States and Russia would have to kind of agree to keep a proxy war away from Israel?
I think it depends on how muscular the United States is prepared to prepared to be. But it's all very difficult and very dangerous to predict in Syria. I mean, when the fighting broke out in 2011, I think it was then Prime Minister Barak who said that Assad would fall within a couple of weeks, and you've seen how well that worked out. So it's very difficult to predict, but we can only analyze it in logical terms and try and project that logic into the future. So I think that Russia basically overall has an interest in keeping the flames as low as possible.
Sure. Well, a big question, of course, that we fortunately don't have time to explore is exactly what that war or that potential war could look like in Syrian territory, because until now it's been mostly with airstrikes. But if there was a real war, maybe we'd see boots on the ground. Either way, thank you guys both so much for coming. Appreciate your thoughts always.
Thank you. Good to be here.
All right, now a seminal turn of events this weekend. Disgraced Hollywood film producer Harvey Weinstein, whose alleged sex crimes against women sparked the watershed Me Too movement, has finally surrendered to police. Weinstein has been arrested in New York City, where he has just been charged with rape in the first and third degree, in addition to various sex crimes and charges. He has posted bail for $1 million and will plead not guilty to all charges.
Mr. Weinstein will enter a plea of not guilty. We intend to move very quickly to dismiss these charges. We believe that they are constitutionally flawed. We believe that they are not factually supported by the evidence, and we believe that at the end of the process, Mr. Weinstein will be exonerated.
Weinstein appeared at the Manhattan courthouse for all of 10 minutes on Friday to submit for arrest and then write a $1 million check to post bail and turn over his passport. A judge has fitted Weinstein with a GPS monitoring device while he awaits trial. At this time, more than 100 women have emerged with horrific allegations of rape, abuse, and sexual misconduct committed by the former Hollywood producer over the last several decades when Weinstein's film company ruled the red carpet. These women say they stayed silent because Weinstein threatened to destroy their careers if they ever went public. Last November, it was revealed that Weinstein actually hired an Israeli intelligence firm known as Black Cube to sway or even discredit his alleged victims and to keep them silent. In many cases, New York's statute of limitations has already expired on many of these alleged sex crimes, closing the possibility of prosecution. But police say they do have enough evidence to prosecute Weinstein on at least 2 rape charges. These carry a maximum sentence of 25 years in jail each. Since the allegations against Weinstein erupted last year, the Me Too movement has seen a wave of men and women rise up against sexual harassment. The impact of the Me Too movement cannot be understated, having reached just about every corner of the world, including here in Israel. Needless to say, for many of Weinstein's alleged victims, this is one of the moments Me Too has long been waiting for.
What would you say to him? Like if he were watching this today, what would you say to him?
We got you. We got you. Yeah.
You did.
Powerful. Thousands of paramedical workers across the state of Israel began an open-ended strike this morning to protest what they say is abuse in their sector. And ILTV's Aaron Porras has the story. And Aaron, I understand that this is primarily a question of manpower. Is that correct?
Yes and no. It's about a lot of things, and manpower is just the tip of the iceberg. Eli Gabay of the Health Workers Union explained that they're striking over the, quote, shortage of manpower slots and a decline in standards for the employment of workers in the paramedical sector, which has led to the expansion of workload, abusive forms of employment, and severe injury to workers and quality of service to the public.
Okay, so obviously, to see a strike this large come together means that they probably didn't see any other road here. But having said that, this probably means that thousands of medical workers are essentially walking off the job here, right? I mean, that's a job that's quite literally life-saving. I mean, is this really what we're going to see happen?
Yeah, and for the foreseeable future. Remember, the labor unions will decide later today whether they'll extend the general strike or not. And the strike seems to have been the last-ditch effort. A labor dispute was actually already opened in January over this after union appeals were dismissed. So now anyone employed by the health ministry, Clalit or Meuchedet Health Services, and many other institutions, we're talking some 5,000 paramedical workers, are all taking the day and possibly more off until these issues are resolved. And again, this is far-reaching. We're talking physiotherapists, occupational therapists, speech therapists.
Really everyone.
Yeah, dietitians, dentists, even arts and crafts therapists. So, yeah.
Well, as I understand it, the way things stand now, the Finance Ministry has asked for 6 weeks' time to look into the data and come back with a decision on this, but let's hope that it really doesn't take that long. Thanks for coming in, Aaron. Now, Israel is, of course, known as the startup nation of the world, but it looks like that title may be in jeopardy right about now. Despite the massive growth of these startup firms over the last decade, new census figures show that the companies are also shutting down in record numbers. In 2016, almost 400 startup firms based in Israel shut down for business, the highest number in 6 years. In that same year, only 625 companies were even launched in the first place, also a record low. These stats are more than a mere drop in the bucket. There's something close to 5,000 startup companies currently doing business here in Israel, a trend that saw its first major spike back in 2011. Now, when you do the math, that means over a third closed down within the 5-year mark. Israeli innovation has turned the country into a world-renowned incubator for these cutting-edge do-it-yourself companies. But any small business owner will tell you, running one is no joke. There is some good news in these census figures, though. Employment overall from startup jobs is way, way up, and with that comes a big boost to salaries, at least in the tech sector. Many Israeli firms, of course, dream of selling big for millions, or dare we say billions someday. Clearly, it takes some serious hard work, patience, and maybe even a little luck to make it to that finish line. Well, the royal wedding may be over, but the UK's royal family is set to make history yet again next month. Prince William will be visiting Israel for 3 days in the end of June. This is the first ever state visit by a member of the British royalty since the time of the British Mandate more than 70 years ago. This trip is part of a region-wide tour, and Prince William will begin this journey in Jordan before flying to Tel Aviv on June 25th. He'll then remain in the country until the 28th, during which time he'll also visit Palestinian leaders in Ramallah. Prime Minister Netanyahu hailed this historic trip when it was first announced back in March. While this is the first official state visit from a member of British royalty, other members of Her Majesty's family have been to Israel in the past. Prince Charles actually visited Israel twice, for Rabin's funeral in '95 and for the funeral of Shimon Peres in 2016. Additionally, this visit comes at a time when the UK's influence in Mideast affairs is becoming increasingly unclear. The United Kingdom will soon withdraw from the EU, making this visit seemingly something of an attempt to retain influence in the region. Still, though England often butts heads with Israel over political matters, the UK does hold massive business ties with Israeli firms, which peaked nearly $7 billion in trade last year. So either way, Israelis are mostly just excited to finally catch a glimpse of a real-life prince in the flesh. Mesothelioma is a particularly fatal form of cancer that develops in the body's organ tissue, and life expectancy in patients ranges from only 12 to 21 months, and nearly half of all patients die within the first year. And that's why a team spearheaded by Israeli researchers has put this disease dead in their crosshairs, and now they may have finally just cracked the breakthrough that we've all been waiting for. The team has successfully stopped the growth of mesothelioma in animals after isolating an enzyme linked to the cancer and halting its production. This is a potentially game-changing development, the result of a joint collaboration between Israeli researchers at the Technion in Haifa and Americans at NYU Langone. Mesothelioma is a notoriously difficult cancer to treat for a number of reasons. It's resistant to most anti-cancer drugs on the market, and because it affects the delicate membranes of the body's organs, the disease is dangerously woven into patients' most fragile systems. In many cases, even attempting treatment at all actually causes the cancer to spread faster. But Israeli experts are determined to crack a solution in human trials now that they've stopped the cancer in animal models. Now, there's still a long road ahead for this treatment, but for tens of thousands of patients all over the world, finally, a flicker of hope. Well, it's no secret that Israelis love their liquor. And let me put it this way. Cocktail bars are to Tel Aviv what Starbucks cafes are to every city in the United States. So it's only fitting that Tel Aviv is about to host its first official cocktail week, and ILTV's Emmanuel Kadosh is here with all the details. Thank you for coming, Emmanuel.
Thank you so much.
Tell me about it.
Like you said, Starbucks, cocktail bars, same thing here in Tel Aviv. You cannot walk down the street here in Tel Aviv and not see at least one very interesting and unique cocktail bar. Everybody has their own drinks, their own, concept to it. And so, as per usual, we're a little bit delayed. We are we're hosting the cocktail festival behind London, Paris, Amsterdam. They've all done it before. So we have a little, background to get excited for. It starts today. and ends June 2nd, so we have a solid week to really get excited. What we're going to be seeing, everybody should get a wristband. It costs around 50 shekels, and it gives you a discount at most of the top bars.
50
here.
shekels.
50 shekels.
Not bad.
And it gives you a discount on the cocktails at the bars and certain events, certain, things that are going to be happening throughout the city.
Okay, but look, I love my liquor too, but I gotta confess, I've never been to one of these cocktail week events, so take me through it. How does it work? You get a wristband at one bar, you get in one bar, it gets you the whole block?
Right, so you get a general wristband, and then that kind of takes you throughout all the cocktail bars that are going to be participating. There's the Imperial Bar, which is actually rated one of the top cocktail bars in all of the Middle East. Spice House, Double Standard, all these really, really famous cocktail bars here in Tel Aviv. So you buy the wristband, you get a discount, and then you also are able to go to certain events that are happening. Some events are, at a barber shop, they're offering, if you have a wristband, they're offering like a haircut with a Jack Daniels, or they're doing collaborations with different chefs and different fashion boutiques and stuff like that.
Well, I understand that this is it's not just Tel Aviv, right? It's kind of like a global affair. As you said, it's been happening all over,
it's been
over the world.
Exactly. It's been happening in London, Paris, Amsterdam, New York City, and obviously it reached us a little bit delayed. We are going to see bartenders from all over the world, from Canada, Germany, London, coming to the bars here in Tel Aviv to host certain bars. Obviously, we're going to have some Israeli bartenders as well. And then at the end, there's going to be a little competition where the best bartender, there's going to be crowned the best bartender in Tel Aviv, and they win a 4,000 shekels worth of cognac. So I'm kind of hoping whoever wins is going to host some kind of event. That's a little too much cognac for one person.
I wouldn't want to meet the person who can drink 4,000 shekels of cognac alone.
Exactly.
I guess that means you have to pick your good bartender.
Yes. Hopefully he's going to be Israeli, so he's going to have the event here in Israel.
Sure. So this starts this week. It starts tonight, I believe, right?
Tonight. You can go get your ticket online and then check out all the really amazing cocktail bars.
Wow. Well, it sounds like we're already far behind.
Yes, me and you are far behind. We don't have our wristbands yet.
Got it. Cool. Thanks so much, Manuel.
Thank you.
Very interesting. All right, a film festival in Jerusalem this week is featuring a very special kind of lineup. The Reframing Reality Film Festival will screen over 20 feature films created by, for, or about people with special needs. And this amazing fest kicks things off tomorrow night at the Jerusalem Cinematheque, which is, by the way, one of the country's most prestigious theaters. This is the 5th year the festival has been brought to Israel. An organization called Shekel, which provides help to more than 8,000 Israelis with special needs, has worked tirelessly to reframe reality through film. Things get going with an opening night, 50th anniversary screening of The Big Dig, a classic Israeli film about a psychiatric patient who escapes into the streets of Tel Aviv. But the international lineup features all kinds of films from all over the world, including last year's Oscar-nominated documentary, Life Animated, which tells the story of an autistic man who learns to cope with the world through his love of Disney animated films. A new Israeli TV series about autistic roommates will also make its debut in Jerusalem as part of the lineup. The show, called On the Spectrum, actually picked up top honors at the Series Mania competition in France, which ran parallel with the Cannes Film Festival earlier this month. The fest offers narratives, documentaries, comedies, dramas, even a VR experience to put you literally in the shoes of what it feels like to have special needs. So needless to say, the schedule offers something for just about everyone.
The Hebrew word of the day is brought to you by IDC Summer Ulpan, open to everyone.
Here comes our Hebrew word of the day. Well, today kicks off Cocktail Week in Tel Aviv, which is why today's word is a little shout out to my personal favorite after-hours drink, good old whiskey, or whiskey. All right, now I'm something of a snob when it comes to my whiskey, whiskey. But here's a few classic cocktails for any other whiskey lovers out there. So you've got your Manhattan, and that's a tried and true mix of whiskey rye, bitters, and vermouth. But then there's also, of course, the ever-dependable whiskey sour, which is just whiskey with some lemon juice or lime juice and some sugar syrup. It's mixed in there, really good. Swap the juice out for some club soda, and boom, you've got yourself a John Collins, my friend. But my personal favorite, I'm glad you asked, well, that would be whiskey bourbon, plus bitters, sugar, an orange slice, and a maraschino cherry. And that equals one delicious old fashioned, which is Don Draper's drink of choice. And with that, let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight will be partly cloudy and warm with a rise in temperatures to a low of minimum 70 or 21 degrees Celsius. Tomorrow you can expect little to no change in weather with a high of about 83 or 28 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.56 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook at Israel English News and on Twitter at ILTV News. I'm Brett Allen Smith, and thank you for watching.